Welcome back to the Red Path. Today we're going to look at Mission 11, Recover the Relics, in our new series, Massacre the Missions. Welcome back. Okay, so this is the first part in a new series where we're going to look at each of the missions from the Grand Tournament Pack, Arcs of Omen, and see how we can best play these missions, especially as a World Eaters army, but this may apply for other combat armies, or there may be some tips relevant to any army you may play. So what we're going to do is briefly go over the mission itself. Then we're going to look at how we're going to score it, what sort of secondaries we may want to take, and some basic deployment tactics and ways to kind of score well during the mission. So starting off, so we can see here is the main mission. It's a 6 objective map, hold 1, hold 2 or hold more, and in the mission you only receive your Battleforge CP if you hold one of the objectives in no man's land or in your opponent's territory. So this is immediately advantageous for players who have an army with a pre-game move or infiltrate or anything like that. And for those running pure World Eaters, not the Disciples of the Red Angel, we will have access to the pre-game move from the Warlord trait which Lord Invocatus gains, which, to be honest, most of us are probably running. It's not necessary, but having access to that early pre-game move is very powerful for any army that has it, especially on this mission. So, if we look at scoring for this mission, it is hold 1, hold 2, and hold more. But with 6 objectives spread out throughout the map, symmetrical with 3 on easy access for either player, you can kind of do some rough math and figure out that if you just hold 2, or 3 in this case, because you may as well hold 3 because otherwise you give your opponent the opportunity to hold more. If you hold 3 for the entirety of the game, you'll get 32 victory points out of the possible 45 for the primary. Now the tertiary for this mission is kill up to 3 units per battle round and score up to 3 victory points. So you can boost that up if you manage to kill 3 enemy units in battle rounds. In any of the 5 battle rounds, you could get up to another 15 victory points. On the screen I've got it as a kind of baseline of holding the 2 or the 3 for 32 victory points and then scoring your tertiary 4 out of the 5 rounds, because as a World Eaters player it can be difficult to get those kills in the first round if you're going first, if your opponent doesn't give you anything to easily charge. But if they do, you could get 1 or 2 points there. So we're looking at about a 44 on primary, fairly easy to attain. Now it's not guaranteed, of course. Your opponent may out aggro you, which honestly is what your opponent should be doing if they're going into World Eaters, because it's very hard to win against World Eaters if you let us get the inertia and the momentum of the game. Next we're going to look at what our kind of overall baseline is for this mission. This is just a guideline. This is not guaranteed, but I would aim for this in a competitive environment for myself. The 44 from primary, then I'd obviously get my 10 points for being painted, then I'm looking at least 30 for my secondary. I've got 30 plus there because I think you can very easily get probably the 45, but in the high 30s at least, even if you're not doing too well. So the way that is by selecting your secondaries based on the mission and what our army is typically capable of. Now, of course, not every World Eaters list is different, but we have got quite an established core with Lord Invocatus, several squads of Berserkers, some Jackals maybe, and then 3, 4 or 5 or even 6 squads of 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound. 8-bound especially for this mission, just being able to fully utilise the pre-game move. So with that in mind, the first secondary you're always going to pick as a World Eaters player, quite frankly, is Pile the Skulls. Now, Pile the Skulls is just automatic points, quite frankly. You're just trading in Blood Tithe points for victory points. You're going to take it in 99.999% of games. It's just free money. Can't go wrong. The next one we're going to look at in this mission is Raise the Banners. And the reason for that is with 3 readily accessible objectives, we can just run our infantry on there, whether that's our berserkers, 8-bound, what have you, raise the banner, and that forces our opponent to come to us if they want to tear the banners down. Now, there will be armies out there occasionally which can outscore us by doing next to nothing in a game, but if they're going to do that, we're just going to get 15 on this. We're probably going to get 15 on Pile the Skulls, and whatever our third secondary pick is, hopefully we score well on that, and that will hopefully tip the balance in our favour. But between these two, we have a very strong chance of getting 30 victory points on our secondary, unless our opponent outruns us, outkills us, and just completely outplays us. But that will happen sometimes, but the majority of games it won't. The third secondary I recommend for this mission, but this is probably the most tenuous because it is the most dependent on your opponent, but I would run the Blood Gods Do. And this is the one where you score for your non-vehicle units dying on objectives and your opponent's non-vehicle units dying when they started the turn on an objective. With 4 objectives in no man's land, there's going to be lots of opportunity for this. What you can do quite simply is pre-game move an 8-bound unit and make sure that one of them is touching one of your home objectives at the start of the first battle round. They will then begin that turn on that objective, run up the board, probably kill something, then it will get killed in response. This tends to happen, but you'll score a Blood Gods Do point for it, and you can just spread that out over the objectives and score very well on it. It's quite an easy one to score strong, doesn't always cap out, and it is typically bad against things like Imperial Knights or Chaos Knights because they don't have anything that will score it for us. But if you're going up against an army like the Astra Militarum or Space Marines, where there's lots of units that need to be on objectives and will die fairly easily to us on objectives, it's a great one to pick. Now we're going to look at some deployment ideas and suggestions. So I've got a terrain set up here. This isn't anything specific, it's just kind of something that involves some common terrain types in a fairly balanced way. You can see, if I get my pen tool up here, we've got some decent protection for melee armies, having these pieces here and here, and even back here, allowing you to keep some units relatively safe from shooting anything that is requiring line of sight. It does block the sight line straight down the middle here, but there are firing lanes coming in from the flanks like this. So there isn't a huge advantage to shooting players, and there isn't a massive advantage to combat players because you still have to cross open ground and difficult ground along these flanks, and the terrain in the middle isn't offering the best kind of defenses because it's what would be called a weak L when the higher side is facing where you're coming from. So you come here, you can hide, but once you breach through this wall, you're in this huge area of open land where the enemy is just going to absolutely hammer you with fire. However, let's just clear this off, and then we can look at how we would consider deploying our units. I'm not suggesting doing this deployment in this particular order. It will actually make it easier if I go out of order, just for purposes of, well, you're going to see. So we're going to start off and we're going to deploy our avocado front and center, right there. The reason for that is, if I can find my handy tool here, this green aura around him is roughly corresponding to the 9 inches of pre-game move that the avocado dishes out. The +2 to move is only 6 inches, but you know, you can string some models around. So what I would do here, in a environment where my opponent is a normal kind of gunline Space Marine army, nothing crazy going on, I would probably have a squad of 8-bound on this flank and a squad of 8-bound on this flank, somewhere like this. I would also stagger my exalted 8-bound right behind them on either flank. I'd also have a squad of berserkers just inside the 9 inches, somewhere like that. All of these pieces, the attempt and intent would be to be fully screened out from shooting where possible. Of course, if they have a unit that can move 30 inches, a flyer or a Tau commander or something like that, they're going to be able to get angles, but you do what you can. I would also have squads of infantry, probably berserkers, in my rhinos, and I'm going to stick one of them on either flank. My jackals here, I'm going to have one back here because I do need a unit that can raise a banner, and Spawn can't do that, and they can just sit there and they'll spread out and screen for the remainder of the game. And we'll stick a squad of jackals over on this flank here. The reason for that is in my terrain setup here, if I can just get that off of Jack's face, in my terrain setup here I've decided that I want to make my push on my left flank, this top flank here. So if I get my brush, the reason for that is if I can push around here, I can use the staging area here, then I've got a little bit of dense protecting me, which is fine over here, but the angles for the opponent to shoot from their end of the board are going to be harder from here because there's so much cover here, whereas here they have lots of ways to get angles over here, which is just going to happen, but they can shoot anywhere they want, whereas over here they actually have to come outside because typically the large ruins are fully obscured, so they'll actually have to move away or come out into this area here to shoot me, which will make my charges a little bit easier. That may be the wrong choice in some games, but just looking at the way the terrain is set up, I would be inclined to slightly overweigh on my left flank over here. So next we're going to have a cheeky spawn somewhere in both deployments, and I'm also going to just put a spawn right in the middle there. So what I'm going to do in turn 1 of the game, let's assume I go first, I'm going to pre-game my regular 8-bound. Let's get all these in the right place here. Sorry, this isn't the best for video, but it is what it is. So I'm going to pre-game my 8-bound up here, and then this 8-bound probably over here. I'm going to want one model just touching the objective there. Then we're then going to throw a spawn out in the normal movement phase, probably get him touching the dents on this side, but I want them to be shootable. I want the spawn to be shootable for my Blood Gods do, and if my opponent ignores them, then the next turn they're going to advance up onto the next objective. My avocado is probably nipped over here. My exalted 8-bound have moved up into this position to stage, maybe raise the banners for me. We're going to have berserkers in a similar position. Our rhinos are going to move out, try and use some cover, maybe touch some dents or use it for obscuring, or use it for any kind of cover they can get. And then this squad of jackals is probably going to come up as well. And then we're going to raise banners on all 3 of these with whatever infantry squad can do it. Then we'll make our normal moves. Our 8-bound will come up here, having started the turn on these 2 objectives, and they'll attempt to charge. They may get one, they may not, but they'll do something. And the intent and hope would be, after they've killed something, if they're not immediately going to get killed in enemy retaliation combat, would be to have a model touching the enemy objective, so when they do die, you're scoring even more points for Blood Gods do. So what this is leaving us to, the position we're actually going to be in then, is there's going to be some casualties on your opponent's side. Whether they're just chaff or actually quite a good unit, your target priority is just going to be dependent on your opponent, but things that can... I typically look to take out my opponent's speed. I don't want them being mobile, so if they've got rhinos or raiders or anything that can move pretty quick and deliver their troops, I want to cut that down because I want the board presence. So after I've caused some casualties and established a bit of a move block on the front, I'm then going to look to hold down the centre, as you can see here, with a rhino positioned here, a rhino threatening this flank, then I've got units staged here and here. So when the opponent does come forwards, because they will, they'll push through the 8-bound, and they'll come up to the midline, looking to threaten and shoot, trying to kill my spawn, which are positioned handily easy for them. In that situation, then I'll be able to leap out with some berserkers from that rhino over here. These ones will come out here, and then I've also got my staged units, so my exalted 8-bound can come out, for instance, at that point, or my berserkers can come out. Whatever I need to do to meet them at the halfway point after they've been destabilized and demoralized and just generally put out by my initial assault. And if I can keep the sphere of battle in the center line here, if I can keep my enemy just hemmed into their own half of the table. It's going to make my job so much easier to score my 15 on the Raise the Banners. It's going to make it very easy to score 15 on Pile the Skulls. And my Blood Gods Do is probably going to be 10, 11 at least by round 3 or 4. And I'm going to be getting lots of kills and scoring lots of points. So anyway, that is my first look at kind of really diving into how to play the missions here. How to maximize everything we can to truly get the best score from the mission, to using our rules, our pre-game moves, our speed, our very strong secondaries to score as much and get more wins. Okay, let me know in the comments if this was helpful. I know it's a bit rough. I'm using Photoshop to do this. I need to find a better tool, but we'll get there. Hopefully it provided some insight, some guidance into how you can score well, how you can score better in this mission. Maybe try using this kind of advice, see if it applies in your games, whether friendly or more competitive stuff. Just let us know in the comments, and please come and join the Discord and let us know there. If you enjoy this, let me know, and I will continue the series and look at more missions and try and develop some more strategies and tactics for us to use to score well and win more games. But until the next one, folks, stay healthy, stay safe, and kill, maim, burn.